Hello, this is Chris Wilhelm, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Friday, August 7th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our first story today, Trump signs executive orders targeting birthright citizenship. The orders come after the Supreme Court ruled June 30th that President Trump's previous efforts to end birthright citizenship were unconstitutional. By Maggie Haberman and Ann E. Marimow. President Trump signed two executive orders on Thursday aimed at limiting the number of people who are eligible for birthright citizenship and cracking down on birth tourism, in which women give birth in the United States to get automatic citizenship for their newborns. The new orders came weeks after the U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 ruling, rejected the president's previous efforts to end birthright citizenship for undocumented immigrants through executive orders. During an Oval Office event, Mr. Trump told reporters that the June 30th Supreme Court ruling was a very, very unfortunate decision. This was done right after the Civil War, Mr. Trump said of the constitutional amendment granting automatic citizenship to infants born in the United States. This was for the babies of slaves. And what's happening now? People are building businesses around it. It was not immediately clear how the twin orders could realistically be enforced. They would restrict those who qualify for birthright citizenship to exclude children of staff working for foreign governments but serving in the United States, and the babies of mothers who lie about their intentions for visiting the country while pregnant. There is a third category, for babies born in U.S. territories, but that would first require congressional action. And then there are children whose parents are tagged by the government as being part of known terrorist groups or who are alien enemies. Mr. Trump has criticized birthright citizenship for years, using it as a political tool as he has repeatedly tried to restrict legal immigration. He has talked about trying to end it since his first presidency. And in an unusual move, he attended oral arguments in the birthright citizenship case at the Supreme Court, a presidential first. Stephen Miller, Mr. Trump's top domestic policy advisor and the architect of much of his immigration platform, and Will Scharf, the White House staff secretary, described the orders as important correctives to the current system. As the president mentioned, the 14th Amendment was passed exclusively in the aftermath of the Civil War, so to ensure that the children of slaves would be citizens, Mr. Miller said. It had no other meaning and purpose outside of that, and that's been clear, obviously, since the day it was passed. Mr. Scharf described birth tourism as something that used to happen incidentally, where somebody who happened to be on vacation here went into labor early and had a baby, a relatively narrow subset that has grown into organized rings, at times criminal rings, setting up a system whereby tens of thousands of people come to the country solely for that purpose. Mr. Scharf said among the actions being considered would be denying visas to visitors they suspect are coming to the country solely for delivering a child in the United States. There's absolutely nothing in here that runs afoul of any of the Supreme Court's opinions on the subject, Mr. Scharf said. A Department of Homeland Security official who was granted anonymity because they weren't authorized to speak about the executive orders threw cold water on the birth tourism order. There is nothing new in it from an enforcement perspective, the official said, because it simply restates existing law. Mr. Miller said that Section 215A of the Immigration and Nationality Act gives the president the authority to engage in these new restrictions. When asked how the administration will determine the difference between tourism and birth tourism. When a reporter noted that the president's own Solicitor General had been unable to tell the Supreme Court precisely how many people were benefiting from birthright citizenship, Mr. Trump replied, "I'll tell you right now, hundreds of thousands, okay? Hundreds of thousands." Pennsylvania State University scholars released a study about the time of the Supreme Court ruling that found that fewer than 0.3% of all births in the United States were to tourists in any year. But Mr. Trump pressed on. You had one man came in with a family head, said he had 56 children. Another one came in. They said they had 98 children. This was not what it was for. This was meant for babies of slaves. It was right after 1 week or 2 weeks after the Civil War ended. In fact, birthright citizenship was ratified as part of the 14th Amendment more than 3 years after the war ended. Any renewed effort to prevent new classes of people from having babies in the United States who are automatically citizens would invite fresh rounds of litigation. There would likely be challenges, for instance, to who counts as alien enemies and invading armies, categories that lower court judges have already rejected in separate cases involving the Trump administration's aggressive immigration policies. Federal immigration law gives the government broad power over entry into the United States, but the law also forbids discrimination in the issuing of immigrant visas. Limits on the entry of certain pregnant women from other countries, as the president's order envisions, could also give rise to claims of discrimination. In their final opinion of the Supreme Court's term, the justices rejected Mr. Trump's attempt to prevent babies born on U.S. soil to undocumented immigrants and temporary foreign residents from being given citizenship automatically. The decision was a major blow to Mr. Trump's long-standing effort to limit the guarantee of birthright citizenship, and the president wrongly suggested after the ruling that he could get around the court's decision through legislation. 5 justices, a majority, found that birthright citizenship was guaranteed in the Constitution, meaning the president would likely need an amendment to change the long-held principle that nearly all children born in the United States are American citizens. A 6th justice, Brett M. Kavanaugh, said he would have struck down the president's order based on federal law, not the Constitution. After the court announced its decision on June 30th, Mr. Trump said he would ask the justices to reconsider their decision, a long-shot request since the Supreme Court has not agreed to revisit an argued case in decades. The deadline for such a filing passed last week without the president asking for a rehearing. In response to the president's orders on Thursday, Cody Wolfsey, deputy director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, said in a statement, "The Supreme Court already decided this issue. Birthright citizenship is guaranteed by the Constitution. No additional executive order can change the meaning of the Constitution. Any executive order that tries to rewrite birthright citizenship will meet the same fate as the last one." Trump administration to deregulate Head Start. While administration officials say the changes will save money by lifting onerous requirements, advocates fear the anti-poverty program will be gutted. By Coral Davenport. The Trump administration announced on Thursday that it would move forward with a plan to eliminate hundreds of federal regulations governing Head Start, in what advocates fear is a push to gut a 61-year-old anti-poverty program aimed at helping the nation's most impoverished young children. The proposed plan, detailed in earlier reporting by the New York Times, would remove most of Head Start's 133 pages of federal requirements for math and literacy curricula, class sizes, medical screenings, home visits. Even a requirement that children brush their teeth after meals would end. Administration officials say the changes will save money by lifting onerous requirements, serve more children by increasing class sizes, and give states and municipalities more control in how the program is run. Critics say the changes will gut the core components of a singular institution that has served 30 million young children with high classroom standards and more health and anti-poverty services than most states provide. Head Start was launched 61 years ago as part of President Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty, and a key figure in its early design and creation was Sargent Shriver, an uncle of Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., the health secretary leading the push to deregulate the program. It provides early education and poverty support services for children up to age 6. In a statement, Mr. Kennedy said the changes would honor his uncle's legacy. "My uncle, Sargent Shriver, founded the program on a simple conviction: strong families, wholesome nutrition, and healthy childhood development can change the course of a child's life, he said. Today, we are returning Head Start to those roots. We are removing unnecessary bureaucracy, strengthening nutrition and physical health, trusting parents and local communities, and opening Head Start to hundreds of thousands more children. Health and Human Services Department officials claimed that the changes, particularly the lifting of rules on small class sizes, would allow Head Start to serve up to 236,000 more children than the 700,000 it does today. They also said that stripping away requirements such as classroom curricula or rules that require Head Start staff to ensure that students have dental exams would save about $2.2 billion. And they noted that the proposed changes would also include new requirements for children's physical activity and nutrition. Advocates for the program said the changes would wipe out the distinctive features and benefits of Head Start. Head Start works because it does far more than provide preschool, said Joel Ryan, director of the Washington State Association of Head Start. It ensures children receive health care, developmental screenings, nutritious meals, disability services, highly qualified teachers, and strong partnerships with families. Those aren't bureaucratic requirements. They are the reason Head Start has changed millions of lives. This proposal would weaken those protections for hundreds of thousands of children and undermine what has made Head Start one of America's most successful early childhood programs. The Health and Human Services Department is expected to post the proposed changes on the Federal Register in the coming days. They will then be open to public comment for 60 days and could still be challenged and amended before being finalized in the coming months. The changes are expected to be implemented in Head Start classrooms sometime in 2027. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Senate panel votes to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress. Dr. Anthony Fauci had refused to answer questions at a hearing last week invoking the Fifth Amendment. Republicans argued he wasn't entitled to that protection because he had a presidential pardon. By Cheryl Gay Stolberg. The Senate Homeland Security Committee voted along party lines on Thursday to hold Dr. Anthony S. Fauci in contempt of Congress for his refusal to answer questions at a hearing last week, clearing the way for the committee to ask the Justice Department to prosecute him. Dr. Fauci invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent more than 100 times last week as Republicans accused him of funding research in China that started the coronavirus pandemic and lying about it to Congress, accusations he vigorously denies. Thursday's vote addressed a different question. Did Dr. Fauci fail to comply with a congressional subpoena, a misdemeanor that carries a prison sentence of up to 12 months? The panel adopted a resolution concluding that he did. The vote once again exposed the sharp partisan divisions around Dr. Fauci. With the midterm elections coming up in November, it also thrusts Dr. Fauci's handling of the pandemic back into the political debate. As far back as 2022, Republicans, including Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, the panel's chairman, have made Dr. Fauci a boogeyman, attacking him to raise money for their campaigns and whip up the party's base. In a statement after the hearing, Dr. Fauci's lawyer, David Schertler, called the vote a crude political stunt intended to punish Dr. Fauci for exercising his constitutional rights. Ordinarily, when a Senate committee passes a contempt resolution, it is forwarded to the full chamber for a vote. If the Senate approves with a 60-vote majority, the resolution goes to the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, who can bring it to a grand jury. But Republicans cannot muster the 60 votes, and the Senate is now headed into its August recess. So Mr. Paul is bypassing the Senate vote. He said after the hearing that the panel would hand-deliver the contempt resolution to both the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney later in the day. It's the committee's verdict that he should be held in contempt, and it will be sent, Mr. Paul said, but no one said that we won't bring it before the Senate. We'll see what happens over time. Democrats protested that Mr. Paul was circumventing federal law. Several said that rather than vote to hold Dr. Fauci in contempt, Congress should abandon its partisan bitterness and the government should convene a bipartisan commission, akin to the 9/11 Commission, to have an independent inquiry into COVID's origins and the pandemic response. Congress had a chance to do that in 2022 when a bill to create an independent panel passed the Senate Health Committee with bipartisan support on a vote of 20-2, but the bill died. The Biden White House never took a position on it, and Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader at the time, did not bring it to the floor for a vote. Dr. Fauci served for nearly 40 years as the government's top infectious disease expert and was well regarded by both parties until the pandemic turned him into a polarizing figure, lionized on the left and a symbol of lockdowns and government overreach on the right. He has said that he testified or briefed members of Congress more than 200 times during his tenure. In appearances before Mr. Paul during the pandemic, he was often combative. In a brief opening statement last week, Dr. Fauci said that it pained him to remain silent, but that he had concluded that Mr. Paul had an unhinged obsession with him and was acting on his lawyer's advice. Thursday's vote was yet another turn in a years-long effort by Republicans to prove that he funded gain-of-function research involving altering viruses at a laboratory in Wuhan, China, the city where the pandemic began, and that the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 leaked from a lab. While the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which he led, did fund such research, Dr. Fauci told a House panel in 2024 that it was molecularly impossible for the taxpayer-funded experiments in Wuhan to have produced the pandemic-causing virus. Republicans were not convinced. "You belong in prison," Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia said then. Such statements from Republicans, including Ms. Greene and Mr. Paul, prompted President Joseph R. Biden Jr. to give Dr. Fauci a preemptive pardon before he left office in January 2025. Republicans argued that the pardon shielded Dr. Fauci, rendering him ineligible to take the fifth. Pointing to his brief statement, they also said he could not testify and refused to testify at the same time. The chair directed Anthony Fauci to answer. He refused, Mr. Paul said before the vote. That is what we are voting on today. Not his opinions, not his politics, not anything he said from the podium 6 years ago. We are voting on whether a witness who has received the benefit of a federal pardon can be ordered by this committee to answer questions and then defy that order without consequence. After the vote, President Trump suggested for the first time that he thinks Dr. Fauci should be prosecuted. Until now, Mr. Trump, who awarded Dr. Fauci a medal during his first term, but said recently that he had never been a big fan of the scientist, has steered clear of the issue. But in the Oval Office on Thursday afternoon, the president appeared to shift course. When a reporter asked if he thought the Justice Department should prosecute Dr. Fauci, Mr. Trump invoked the contempt prosecutions of Stephen K. Bannon and Peter Navarro, who worked in his first administration. They prosecuted these two people, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves, the president said. So when you see that happen, you sort of say maybe he should. What he did is far more serious than a lot of crimes, frankly. Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, the senior Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and a former constitutional law professor, said that Mr. Paul had already tainted a prosecution by asserting he wanted to see Dr. Fauci in prison, while at the same time trying to force him to testify. It just would never occur to me to go around saying a witness should be in prison and then try to prevent them from invoking their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination over the very matter I'm claiming is criminal. There's more to this article, and if you'd like to hear it, call us at 716-821-5555 and we'll read it to you. Let's move on to a new topic now. This AI just created viruses not found in nature. Scientists trained artificial intelligence on libraries of DNA and then asked the model to create recipes for viral genomes. 16 of them were viable, yielding new viruses, by Carl Zimmer. For the first time, scientists have used artificial intelligence to create new kinds of viruses, raising hopes for medical advances while also raising the disturbing possibility that the technology could someday be used to invent dangerous pathogens. Synthesizing viruses from scratch is hardly new. Researchers long ago learned how to manufacture viral genomes. They are used to investigate antiviral drugs and vaccines, as well as to learn how viruses work. But the new study, published Thursday in the journal Science, goes well beyond duplicating viral genes. Scientists at Stanford University and the Arc Institute, a research organization in Palo Alto, California, taught AI to recognize patterns of DNA structure in nature and then to use that data to write recipes for entirely new viruses. The researchers followed those recipes to create DNA molecules, which they inserted into bacteria. The modified bacteria then produced viruses never seen in nature. The viruses were able to infect other bacteria, demonstrating that they were viable. This is an important milestone, said Patrick Kai, a synthetic biologist at the University of Manchester, who was not involved in the study. The viruses dreamed up by AI do not pose a threat to humans because they are similar to a naturally occurring virus called Phi-X174, which can infect only bacteria. But the new study adds to growing worries that artificial intelligence might enable the creation of a new generation of biological weapons, from deadly poisons to unstoppable pandemics. Dr. Moritz Hanke, a fellow at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, who was not involved in the new study, said governments and scientific organizations have been slow to develop guardrails that could block the creation of a deadly virus, even as the science races ahead. The authors of the study relied on an AI model called Evo, which is similar in some ways to ChatGPT, made by OpenAI. ChatGPT answers questions by stringing together words that seem likely to follow one another. It can do this thanks to years of training on vast amounts of text gathered from the internet, books, and other sources. DNA is strikingly similar to a book in many ways. A string of molecular building blocks, known as nucleotides, arrayed like letters in a line of text. A gene consists of hundreds of nucleotides drawn from a four-letter alphabet, A, C, G, and T. The sequence encodes the instructions for building proteins and other molecules. DNA has its own rules of grammar, and if a sequence violates them, the result is biological gibberish. The researchers wondered if Evo could pick up these rules on its own. Instead of training it on text, they trained it on genetic sequences drawn from millions of animals, plants, microbes, and viruses. All told, Evo scanned about 9 trillion nucleotides. Evo eventually recognized patterns common across the tree of life and used them to generate blueprints for new genes encoding proteins that could perform specific jobs. These results led the team to wonder if Evo could master not just single genes, but also an entire genome. While a human genome contains over 3 billion nucleotides, many viruses have genomes just a few thousand nucleotides long. It just felt like the obvious next step, said Samuel King, a graduate student at Stanford University and an author of the new study. He and his colleagues gave Evo another round of training, this time on the 11 genes of Phi-X174 and about 15,000 of its closest relatives. They made this choice in part because scientists know Phi-X174 intimately, have studied it for close to a century, and because it's a bacteriophage that infects only E. coli. They knew that viruses similar to it would be safe. Once Evo got familiar with the genomes of Phi-X174 and its kin, the researchers prompted the model to write new versions of its own. Evo generated 700,000 potential versions. They ended up making DNA molecules from 285 of EVO's suggested sequences. When those genomes were ready to test, Mr. King and his colleagues inserted them into bacteria, which they spread across petri dishes. In many of the dishes, the microbes grew peacefully. EVO's genomes had failed. But in one dish, researchers noticed clear dots appearing in the cloudy film of bacteria, the telltale sign of multiplying viruses. The DNA that the scientists had inserted into the bacteria had produced protein shells that contained viral genes. As Mr. King and his colleagues tested more genomes, they saw more clear dots. All told, they discovered that 16 of EVO's genomes produced viable new viruses. Oliver Crook, a protein chemist at the University of Oxford who was not involved in the new study, cautioned that EVO's viruses were not radically new creations. They tend to be very similar to natural species, relying on the same underlying biology. A lot of our science rests on viruses as technology, he said. To treat people with genetic disorders, for example, doctors will load genes into viruses, which deliver them into cells. But along with this hope, EVO's initial success has raised concerns that AI could be used to create deadly pathogens. The potential dangers were already on the minds of the researchers as they trained EVO. They did not provide the model with data about viruses that infect humans, and they excluded similar viruses that infect other animals, plants, and fungi. As a result, EVO can't generate genomes of viruses that could threaten humans. Last week, Dr. Hanke noted the National Institutes of Health rolled out a new policy for stopping high-risk life science research. The policy would bar scientists from experiments that would make biological agents more harmful. But computer-based research, such as generating virus DNA with AI, is not prohibited by this policy unless it involves an entity of concern, the agency said in a statement. But Dr. Hanke said there's no consensus on judging the possible danger of a virus made by an AI model. What is the risk of what I've never seen before? He asked. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump administration to pay German firm $1.2 billion to cancel wind leases. It was the fifth such deal struck by the administration to get companies to drop offshore wind projects. By Brad Plummer. The Trump administration will pay the German energy firm RWE $1.22 billion to abandon plans to build wind farms off the coasts of New York, California, and Louisiana, the company announced on Thursday. It was the fifth such deal the government has reached this year to halt the development of offshore wind, a source of renewable energy that President Trump has derided for decades. Under the agreement, RWE will voluntarily surrender 3 leases it owned for wind farms in federal waters. Those projects were in the early stages of development and had little chance of moving forward under the Trump administration, which has halted all permitting for offshore wind. The government would reimburse RWE roughly what the company had paid for the leases under the Biden administration. The settlement would also resolve any legal disputes over the leases, the company said. The company will invest about the same amount in new natural gas projects in the United States, it said. After careful consideration, it was determined there is no path forward to permit these projects in the U.S. for the foreseeable future, RWE said in a statement, referring to the offshore wind leases. The company determined that this resolution best serves the interests of its stakeholders and allows it to direct resources toward energy projects that can be advanced with certainty. The firm will spend $900 million to acquire an indirect 16% stake in a liquefied natural gas project in Louisiana and sign a $300 million order for new gas turbines that generate electricity. The company said it was planning to build at least 15 natural gas peaking plants in the United States. The agreement is similar to deals that the Trump administration has struck since March with other energy developers, including Total Energies and Invenergy, to refund wind leases off California, Maine, New Jersey, New York, and North Carolina in exchange for investing in fossil fuel projects instead. Including Thursday's announcement, the government has so far spent roughly $3.9 billion to get companies to terminate 12 offshore wind leases. Americans deserve an energy system built on common sense, not one dependent on costly subsidies or technologies that can't meet our country's current demand, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said in a statement. We welcome RWE's agreement and voluntary investment in projects that strengthen our nation's energy security. Democrats denounced the deal. New Yorkers are suffering from sky-high energy costs, and Trump's answer is to spend almost $4 billion of taxpayer money killing 12 offshore wind power leases that would have provided unlimited clean energy once online, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the minority leader, said. Wind power generates far fewer plant warming emissions than burning fossil fuels, and many states had been developing offshore wind farms to help meet their goals for tackling climate change. Yet Mr. Trump has called the technology ugly and costly and has sought to block new wind turbines. Last year, the Interior Department ordered work to stop on 5 wind farms already under construction off the East Coast, but federal judges struck down all those moves. The Pentagon has also stalled approvals of wind farms on land. The agreement with companies to forfeit their offshore leases are a new strategy, which the government turned to after losing court cases over the stop work orders. The deals are a highly unusual use of taxpayer dollars. 7 Democratic-controlled states, including New York, have sued the Trump administration over the Interior Department's deal with Total Energies. California has also sent a notice of intent to sue over a deal the Trump administration struck to cancel a wind farm off the state's central coast. RWE is one of the world's largest renewable energy developers. It currently has 18 offshore wind farms in operation, mainly in Europe, with more under construction. Shortly after Mr. Trump won the 2024 election, RWE's chief executive said he was placing plans to expand offshore wind development in the United States on hold. The company's subsidiary, RWE Americas, is also a major developer of onshore wind, solar power, batteries in the United States, as well as some gas power. Wars, wildfires, and migrants leave Europe straining for control. A brutal summer has exposed how much pressure European countries are under from forces largely out of their grip: war in Iran and Ukraine, record heat, and more. By Michael D. Shear. Once again, in recent days, Europe has seemed to be watching from the sidelines as its destiny is shaped by outside forces. Would President Trump choose to restart a massive war with Iran and drive up the cost of oil? Would global warming drive wider and worse wildfires, even as several already raged across the continent? Would a sudden, unexplained surge of people across the Moroccan border into a Spanish exclave, almost all of whom were immediately sent back, divide the bloc's leaders and fuel the far right? It has already been a brutal summer for Europe. 2 wars, record heat, rising inflation, and deep anxiety about food, energy, and security. The back-to-back crises are prompting calls for joint action, urgent Zoom meetings between different groups of presidents and prime ministers, and political hand-wringing in parliaments from Poland to the United Kingdom. But like so much else that has happened in the past several years, many of Europe's challenges are out of its control. The Iran war, a conflict that most of Europe never wanted, has disrupted life across the region, driving up the price of gas, groceries, and travel. the continent's leaders have pledged to help secure the passage of oil through the Strait of Hormuz once the fighting ends, and yet they seem destined to hear about the next stage of the war from Mr. Trump's social media feed. Europe has been unable to resolve the war in Ukraine after more than 4 years of bloodshed. Its achievements in cutting emissions to combat climate change are overshadowed by the actions of the United States and China. The future of AI is being shaped largely elsewhere. Right-wing populism has risen, fueled by migration, inequality, and misinformation. No matter how you look at it, measure it, this is a difficult, unsettling time for Europe, said Richard Haass, who served for 2 decades as the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He said Europe is partly a victim of circumstance, but also is responsible for its lack of authority over its own fate. It's not just that they're underspent, but they've underorganized themselves when it comes to their own security, he said. It's essentially a bystander, with a few exceptions, to the AI competition. That's not something that was done to Europe by the United States or China. That was something that was done by Europe to itself. On many fronts, Europe has acted. When Russia invaded Ukraine more than 4 years ago, Europe and Britain immediately took steps to support Ukraine, including sending billions of dollars in aid, imposing sanctions on Russia, and welcoming millions of Ukrainian refugees into their countries through special programs. After Mr. Trump re-entered the White House in 2025 and signaled a warmer stance toward President Vladimir V. Putin, Britain, France, Germany, and other European nations formed the Coalition of the Willing to try to protect Ukraine's interests in any peace deal and worked behind closed doors to reconcile the Ukrainian and American presidents. Those efforts helped prevent Mr. Putin from cutting a deal with Mr. Trump at Ukraine's expense. But while the coalition has repeatedly stated that no arrangements regarding European interests and security can be negotiated without Europeans, that has proved difficult to enforce. Time and again, Mr. Trump has sidelined America's allies in favor of direct and largely fruitless talks with either Russia or Ukraine. For years, European leaders have spoken about strategic autonomy and Europe's emergence as a serious security actor. Licia Ogrysko, the director of the Sahaidichny Security Center in Kyiv, wrote for the Atlantic Council. The coming months may provide the clearest test yet of whether those ambitions are realistic. They have had less influence over the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, even though its effects are felt keenly across the continent. Europe's vocal opposition to Mr. Trump's decision to go to war enraged the American leader and soured transatlantic relations. In April, partly as an effort to repair relations with Mr. Trump, Britain and France announced an effort to organize a military operation that could help protect free and open travel through the Strait of Hormuz, once a lasting ceasefire was agreed to. But the on-again, off-again fighting between the United States and Iran has made it too dangerous for the operation to begin. Diplomats from several European countries said the possibility that they will send military ships to help remove mines from the strait or escort tankers is essentially on hold until it becomes clear whether the war is truly on pause. Mr. Trump has threatened in recent days to dramatically escalate strikes on Iran if the regime does not agree to open the strait. On Tuesday, the president told Fox News that Iran would be hit very hard if the crucial waterway was not opened very soon. Even as the Iran crisis has continued, wildfires have been raging across Europe, where swaths of bright red on the weather maps indicated the unprecedented heat waves that have become increasingly frequent. For most of the past 2 decades, European countries have mostly been in agreement about the dangers posed by climate change and have acted to cut emissions and invest in renewable energy. But since Mr. Trump's arrival in the United States, they have been at odds with one of the world's largest polluters, making their efforts to confront the changing climate more difficult. Now it's clear that countries in the region are facing the consequences of global warming, with average temperatures rising faster than on any other continent. Britons are living through the driest July in nearly 2 centuries. Fires have displaced more than 300,000 people in France and Spain. In Greece, firefighters died battling blazes that are yet to be fully controlled. The surge last week of tens of thousands of people into Ceuta, a tiny Spanish territory on the North African coast, raised the possibility of a new crisis that is testing European unity on one of the region's most potent political issues. Pedro Sanchez, Spain's left-wing prime minister, has become famous for his welcoming approach to some migrants, particularly workers from Latin America. But he has taken a tougher approach with people attempting to illegally cross Spain's borders with Morocco. He cracked down on the arrivals in Ceuta quickly with his country's military, and most were sent back over the weekend. A floating barrier is being set up near a seawall between the two countries. The incident exposed tensions within the European Union that have grown deeper in recent years, as far-right parties, including the Alternative for Germany and France's National Rally, have seized on fear of migrants as a way to energize political supporters. Almost 24 EU countries lashed out at Spain in the hours after the migrants arrived in Ceuta, with some calling for suspending the country from the bloc's free movement zone. Mr. Sanchez responded by calling those nations selfish. Some analysts note that the lack of solidarity with Spain at a time when it faced an external threat was an indication of the difficulty that the continent has in projecting authority on the global stage. Mr. Haas of the Council on Foreign Relations said he thinks the lack of unity underscores the fundamental problem for Europe as it seeks to shape its future. The whole, he said, is much less than the sum of its parts. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. New York doctor sentenced in Japan for vandalizing ancient religious sites. Masahide Kanayama, a surgeon and an expert in endometriosis, received an 18-month suspended sentence after a court found him guilty of damaging the sites. By Kyuko Notoya and Hari Raj. A court in Japan on Thursday handed a Manhattan doctor a suspended sentence of 18 months in prison after finding him guilty of vandalizing 2 ancient religious sites, capping more than a decade of litigation that led to a rare extradition. Masahide Kanayama, 63, had been accused of smearing an oily liquid on wooden pillars at a 1,000-year-old Buddhist temple on the outskirts of Tokyo and on an offerings box at a Shinto shrine founded in 643 BC. Both incidents took place in 2015. Dr. Kanayama, a practicing Christian, admitted during the trial that he had damaged the sites. "I poured the oil believing I was being guided by the Holy Spirit, but it was my own misconception," he told the court, according to NHK, Japan's public broadcaster. In her ruling on Thursday, Judge Yoko Sugiyama of the District Court in Chiba, a prefecture east of Tokyo, noted the historical and cultural value of the structures and said the act of prioritizing one's own religious beliefs to commit the crime warrants severe condemnation. The court suspended the sentence for 3 years, citing factors including Dr. Kanayama's vow to never repeat the offense, NHK reported. It was not clear whether he would return to the United States following the sentencing. His lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Dr. Kanayama, a Japanese citizen and legal permanent resident of the United States, has practiced medicine in Manhattan for nearly 3 decades. He also founded a nonprofit called International Marketplace Ministry, which focuses on personal relationships to God through prayer in daily life and work, according to court papers from his extradition hearings. "I believe the Holy Spirit works through me by giving me an ability to perform my unique surgical technique," Dr. Kanayama told the New York Times in November last year. When guided by faith, medicine becomes a way to serve God by serving others. My goal is to let God's love be reflected through my actions and services. Japan asked the United States to extradite him in 2016. He has repeatedly tried to prevent the extradition, but a federal judge's ruling in February cleared the way for him to be sent to Japan. He was arrested on March 4th while on a flight from the United States to Japan, according to the Chiba Prefectural Police. Japanese authorities said Dr. Kanayama had left oil on pillars at the main entrance of the Naritasen Shinshoji Temple in the city of Narita. A temple official said the oil had left blackish stains. At the nearby Katori Jingu Shrine in Katori, a shrine official said oily liquid had been left on wooden poles, stairs, and a box for donations. Japanese authorities said they had used surveillance footage from the religious sites, as well as car rental and flight records, to trace the incidents to Dr. Kanayama. The authorities also referred to YouTube videos from 2012 that showed a man who they said was Dr. Kanayama talking about anointing shrines with oil for religious purposes. His lawyers have argued that Japan had targeted Dr. Kanayama in part because he was a Christian. The Japanese consulate in New York said in November that the extradition request was a matter of law enforcement and is in no way motivated by political or religious considerations. Israeli settler charged with manslaughter and death of Palestinian activist. The indictment was a rare case in which the Israeli authorities pressed charges against an Israeli in the killing of a Palestinian, by Adam Razgan and Nathan Odenheimer. An Israeli settler was charged on Thursday with reckless manslaughter in connection with the death of a well-known Palestinian activist, a rare indictment by the Israeli authorities of an Israeli accused of violence against Palestinians. The activist, Auda Hathalin, whose work was featured in the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land, was shot dead in al-Khair, a village in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, in June 2025. The settler, Yenon Levy, who runs an outpost near the southern West Bank city of Hebron, was charged in the killing, with the indictment saying he fired in a reckless manner toward an area with people, including children. On Thursday, Mr. Levy said he had written a letter to the state prosecutor's office in response to the indictment, a copy of which he shared with the New York Times. In the letter, he suggested that he believed his life had been at risk when Mr. Hathalin was killed. He also contended the indictment was unreasonable and de facto support for terrorism. Mr. Hathalin's killing shined a light on deadly settler violence in the West Bank, which has reached record levels since the Hamas-led October 7, 2023 attack on southern Israel. The family of Mr. Hathalin, 31, said it was relieved to learn of the indictment, but expressed frustration that Israeli prosecutors did not bring a more severe charge against Mr. Levy. A manslaughter conviction could result in up to 11 years in prison. We hope we will achieve justice for Auda, Khalil Hathalin, his brother, said in an interview. That's our sole demand. The last time an Israeli settler was indicted on a charge of killing a Palestinian was in 2019, according to Ziv Stahl, executive director of Yesh Din, an Israeli human rights group that focuses on accountability in the West Bank. Palestinians attacked by settlers often have little legal recourse, according to Israeli human rights groups. Yesh Din, an Israeli human rights group, examined more than 1,700 cases of Jewish extremist violence in the West Bank from 2005 to 2024 and found that 3% ended in a full or partial conviction. About 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank live under Israeli military rule, which offers them few, if any, guarantees of justice. In contrast, some 500,000 settlers in the territory have the legal rights of other Israeli citizens. Khalil Hathalin, 39, said the family's hometown, al-Khair, had been facing frequent attacks since his brother's killing, including settlers throwing stones at villagers and their homes and cutting down their olive trees. In 2024, the Biden administration imposed sanctions on Mr. Levy after accusing him of intimidation and violence against Palestinians. About a year later, President Trump removed the penalties against Mr. Levy and other settlers accused of extremist violence. Mr. Levy, whose outpost is known as a base for settler attacks, has been involved in running an earthworks company. On July 28, 2025, the day of Mr. Hathalin's death, Mr. Levy instructed a 17-year-old working for him to clear a new path through privately owned Palestinian land with an excavator, and to continue even as Palestinian villagers hurled stones and attempted to block it, the indictment said. Then, Mr. Levy confronted some of the villagers before shooting a pistol in the direction of buildings in el-Khayr, the document said. The bullet hit Mr. Hathalin, who was filming from the yard of a village community center approximately 20 yards away, the indictment added. Witnesses said the sight of his death was harrowing. I saw Mr. Hathalin lying in a pool of blood, said Matan Berner Kadish, a 30-year-old American-Israeli activist who spent time in the village learning Arabic last summer and was present when the shooting happened. Minutes later, Mr. Berner Kadish said he approached Mr. Levy and asked him if he was aware he had just killed someone. I'm happy I did, Mr. Levy replied, according to Mr. Berner Kadish. Mr. Levy did not immediately respond to a request for comment about Mr. Berner Kadish's account. In our final article today, Cowboys and Cowgirls light up a country music festival in Africa. Fans gathered in Kenya to celebrate a genre born far away, but that more and more Africans are coming to appreciate. By Brian O. Otieno. The country music fans sang along to classic hits, drinking beer and whiskey as they tried to keep their line dancing synchronized. No memo was needed on the dress code. The Gong Racecourse, a horse track on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya, was packed with cowboys and cowgirls wearing their best Western styles. Hats and boots, said Amish Gupta, one of the attendees. The crowd was there to celebrate International Cowboys and Cowgirls Day, a festival in Kenya held on the last Saturday of July. For the second year in a row, the audience kicked up dust, danced, and ate barbecue, celebrating a musical genre born far away, but that more Africans are coming to appreciate. Country has long been played on radio stations across the continent and has drawn increasing interest from local artists over the years. It is particularly popular among Afrikaners in South Africa, where artists like Bobby Angel and Lance James first became stars. Purity Mulubu and Fatuma Isaac, both in their 20s, wore matching beige hats to the horse track. They were both newcomers to the festival this year. Ms. Mulubo said she knew she was a country fan when she first heard Kenny Rogers' The Gambler on the radio as a child. She is also Maasai, a pastoral community in Kenya that she said is essentially cowboy. We have cows and ranches, she said. The only difference is that we don't wear hats and boots and leather jackets. Many in the audience did indeed wear leather jackets in the chilly evening air, but they ditched them when the event's main act, the Nigerian country singer Ochioro Okerji, known as the Countryman, took the stage. Wearing a fringed brown leather jacket and black pants, he fired up the crowd by thrashing his guitar as his soft baritone belted out covers of classic country songs like Don Williams' I Believe in You. The countryman's energy flowed into the crowd as it eagerly geared up for another round of line dancing. "Are you having a good time?" he yelled. Days earlier, sitting outside a shop selling cowboy outfits in Nairobi, the singer said playing in Kenya would be like performing on easy mode compared to playing in his home country. Nigerian audiences were mostly primed for Afro beats. He and Elijah Maniecki, the festival's main organizer, hunched around a cable reel table, shared oranges and tangerines, and talked about how they fell in love with country, which crooned in the background at the store. Mr. Maniecki said he grew up listening to the genre and watching westerns. He once visited Texas and was attracted to the cowboy shops he saw there, eventually opening this one in Nairobi. He later ventured into events after he noticed country music was only played in bars and clubs around Kenya. I saw that the best way to have everyone enjoy country music was to do a family country event, said Mr. Maniecki. He said the festival had welcomed more than 5,000 cowboys and cowgirls last year. He has plans to hold tours across the continent in the future, he said. Last year's festival only featured local acts and was dominated by a home crowd. This year, a good number of country fans flew in from abroad. I flew in from Ireland just to be part of this, said Krzysztof Gwoździanski, 43, who said he had seen videos of last year's festival on YouTube. The local country scene in Kenya is still heavy on cover songs, but performers are remaking classic tunes in local languages. At the festival, Yathera the Wildflower sang a rendition of Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors in her native Kikuyu language. Kikuyu renditions bring country music closer to home, and our language gets to be appreciated internationally, she said. Country is particularly popular among the Kikuyu, Kenya's most populous ethnic group. Some say Mugithi, a folk genre in the Kikuyu community that features a lone singing guitarist, is similar to country. The countryman said he hated country music as a boy, but his father played the genre in his car as he took him to school. Somehow it slipped into my conscience, he said. Later, he found one of his father's old memory cards and began to enjoy songs by Don Williams, Kenny Rogers, and Elvis Presley. He originally asked his mother for a guitar and mastered it sufficiently enough to play Jim Reeves covers in church, filling people, as he put it, with the Holy Spirit. He started to perform at weddings and later became an internet sensation. These days, he also writes his own songs, drawing on his life experiences. A lot of people do what they do to appeal to other people, he said, placing orange peels on the cable reel table. I appeal to myself. Shortly after midnight, to the delight of the crowd at the horse track, he performed Loner in Limbo, his first original song. It traces life's highs and lows. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Friday, August 7th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Chris Wilhelm. Thank you for listening.